Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Ward from the Transition Network, and we're going to start shortly. I just encourage people as you're joining us to put your Zoom setting in speaker view, because as you can see, we have some slides tonight that we're going to share, and that's the best view rather than gallery view to see the program tonight. So again, welcome. It's great to have you here. And on behalf of I'm the co-chair of the Northern New Jersey chapter of the Transition Network. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, TTN is a national nonprofit organization of women aged 50 and forward. We direct our energy and talents to new interests and look for ways to add more joy and meaning in our lives. Tonight's initiative was developed with the Center for Hope and Safety, Bergen County, New Jersey's only not-for-profit agency dedicated to helping adults and children rebuild their lives beyond domestic violence and abuse.
Recording in progress.
As communities have continued, sorry, go ahead, Kathy. Oh. As communities have continued to navigate the challenges of the pandemic, the incidence of domestic abuse surged. Thus, we call this program the hidden pandemic of domestic violence. Tonight, we've pulled together 3 experts to help describe the issues in more detail and what is being done to help. Venice Michelson is a professor and expert on gender and criminal justice and intimate partner victimization of women from Montclair State University. Mira Moreno is director of programs and a licensed mental health counselor from the Center for Hope and Safety. Catherine Miller is an attorney and legal advocate for domestic violence victims who also works for the Center for Hope and Safety. So our agenda tonight is we're going to have each of our speakers share on various aspects of domestic violence and the services provided by shelters like the Center for Hope and Safety. And we've interspersed some videos to bring those points to life. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up and have our experts answer any questions that you have. So you can start putting questions in the Q&A feature at any time as we go along. We have a video to first kick things off. This video was actually created last year for the Center for Hope and Safety's online gala, and it features Pat Battle, who many of you might know is a well-known local New Jersey TV reporter.
So what brings me here tonight? Well, in my role as a journalist, far too often I have to tell the stories of people who've been impacted by domestic or intimate partner violence, as evidenced by the case that made Gabby Petito a household name. But what happened to Gabby happens in countless households every minute of every day. Listen to some of the statistics. In Bergen County, right here in our backyard last year, 3 people lost their lives to domestic violence. And according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, about 20 people are physically abused every minute in this country by an intimate partner. I did the math. That amounts to some 29,000 people every single day. About 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men, yes, men, experience physical violence, sexual violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. More than 10 million adults experience domestic violence in the United States every year.
Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Venice Michelson is the Associate Professor of Justice Studies and Interim Director of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at Montclair State University. Venice is going to give us an introduction to the problem of domestic violence. Venice?
Thank you so much, Donna, and thanks for that good introduction. I wanted to first start out with a definition of domestic violence because it's generally a bit broader than people understand. It's felony or misdemeanor crimes of violence that are committed by a current or a former spouse or intimate partner of the victim, or by a person with whom the victim shares a child in common, even if they're not in a romantic relationship, by a person who's cohabitating with or has cohabitated with the victim as a spouse or an intimate partner, by a person similarly situated to a spouse of the victim under domestic or family violence laws, or by any person against, by any other person against an adult or youth victim who's protected from that person's act under domestic or family violence laws of the jurisdiction. So it's really a very broad definition of domestic violence. And what we know, what you'll see in my slide here are some sort of basic data of how frequently it happens. And intimate partner violence, domestic violence are really a significant public health issue that has many individual and societal costs. We're talking about over a third of women who are survivors of intimate partner violence, and about 11% of male IPV survivors experience some form of physical injury that's related to the violence against them. It can also result in death, as was spoken about earlier. And we suggest that data suggests that about 1 in 5 homicide victims are actually killed by an intimate partner. So our worries about strangers in dark alleyways are actually not nearly as well-founded as the TV shows would make us think. So domestic violence is incredibly deadly, and it has all sorts of terrible implications for its victims. When we're talking about, next slide, thank you. When we're talking about New Jersey, we've got many thousands of domestic violence offenses that are reported to police. You'll notice 2 things from these data. First of all, the data that we get are from police. So it is automatically assumed that any of the data are only for people who report to police, which is yet a small fraction of the people who are suffering from domestic violence. Also, you'll notice that these data are from 2019. It's from NJ.gov. More recent data, at least from NJ.gov, were not available. So the pandemic has really shifted this quite a lot. We've got arrests that are made in just over a third of the offenses that were reported. And children are present in about a quarter of the arrests that are made for domestic violence. So this isn't just between 2 adults, it's when people are witnessing, when people are around and are also traumatized by the results of this interpersonal violence. We'll do next slide. When it comes to the pandemic, there was a huge impact of the pandemic when it comes to research, right? I'm a researcher, so I can speak to the research. What we know from the research is there was a huge impact of home confinement on people who were stuck in their homes without access to people who might be able to see the signs of abuse and violence, or obtain the assistance that's necessary to help people escape violent situations. This is very similar to what happens in other disasters, including social isolation, economic instability, and increasing conflicts in relationships and families. This also means that the factors that are often associated with domestic violence, such as increased male unemployment, the stress of childcare and homeschooling, increased financial insecurity, maladaptive coping strategies, mental and physical health struggles, and stress as loved ones are apart, sick, or even dead were dramatically increased in the pandemic. Next slide. So the wheel of power and control is sort of a classic in the field of domestic violence. And I know that some of these things can be a little bit hard to see, in the slide here. But I'd like you to pay attention to the many ways. What's the important point of this image? The important part of this image are the different, or that power and control and violence can happen in so many different ways. They can use coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation. Notice all of these things and how they're related to the pandemic and made worse by the pandemic, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children to control people, using male privilege, and using economic abuse. Now, remember that all of these things can be happening, and we might say to ourselves, well, why doesn't she just leave? Because most domestic violence situations are against women, though men are definitely also impacted and are less likely to come forward because of stereotypes. But also, why wouldn't you just leave when these terrible things are happening? But you need to remember, abusers are often people that are loved. And, even if they do terrible things, they are loved. A victim may rely on their abuser for economic reasons. That person might be the only one working, might be paying the bills. They might be the one that's keeping a roof over their head. Children will love an abuser often, and economic realities may just be too stark for people. So that there's a lot of reasons why even when things are terrible, people still stay. Next slide. So then moving on to the segue to my incredible colleagues here for the Center of Hope and Safety, are that the research does show that there are a number of ways in which we can have hope, that we can teach safe and healthy relationship skills to people so that abuse doesn't happen in the first place, or that we can get out of cycles of abuse. Also, engaging influential adults and peers. This is seen throughout when we're talking about the criminal justice system. When we have mentors, things can get better. Disrupting the developmental pathways towards partner violence. When harm people. So when you have someone who is being harmed, if you can disrupt that and show them new ways to do things, then everyone is better off at the end. Creating protective environments, which is something the Health Center for Hope and Safety does. Strengthening economic supports for families, right? Making sure that people have the money so that money is not a barrier, and supporting survivors to increase their safety and lessen the harms against them in a variety of ways. And then final slide for me. I hope that you will all be in contact if you'd like to know an academic perspective on these things. And then, so my information is there. You're welcome to text me or to email me. And then I will toss this over to my distinguished colleagues who are making change every day. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, Vanessa. That was a very helpful introduction and background to the problem. But I think now we have a video that we'd like to show of a client, actually, an actual client from the Center for Hope and Safety, in her own words, that can kind of bring to life some of what you were talking about, Vanessa. Just so people know, her image in this video is blurred and her voice is altered for safety and confidentiality reasons. But this is Francine's story.
I suffered domestic abuse at the hand of my husband for many years in silence. This abuse was emotional, economic, sexual, and at times physical in nature. I am not a submissive woman, but over the years, as the manipulation and gaslighting and abuse progressed, I found myself trapped in it. I was eventually completely controlled and it felt impossible to get out. I was immensely ashamed of my situation and I coped in negative, self-destructive ways. The last 2 years, it progressed to a point that I allowed all my purpose to be removed from my life, basically held hostage with no permission to go anywhere, no privacy, not even my own set of keys. The abuse trickled down to our children, and I fell into a deep depression, losing the will to live. I couldn't even get out of bed for some time. I didn't exist. The defining moment that motivated change was not my husband stalking me, watching me through hidden cameras, depriving me of all money, clean laundry, and food. It wasn't him checking the mileage on the car, forbidding me to use the washer, dryer, vacuum, and dishwasher. It wasn't not allowing me to get a job, his sexual assault or violent aggressions towards me. It wasn't his cruel words spoken in front of our children. It was the moment our 9-year-old daughter told me that he had touched her in bed inappropriately. My journey down the rabbit hole of self-destruction ended in that moment. That is what it finally took for me to say no more. I began with the center support group that met weekly. The women who dedicate their lives to this mission offered as many resources as they could to help me survive. They provided food and toiletries from pantries, a gas card, backpacks for the children and school supplies, supermarket and gas gift cards, and so much more. These women have gone above and beyond, to say the least. I can honestly say that I don't know where I would be today without the Center of Hope and Safety. I suffered domestic abuse.
That's I've seen now that video a couple of times, and I'm always, it always touches me so much because Francine's story is, I think it sounds like from what Venice shared, very, very typical, and shows what women have to go through until they finally are able to get to the stage being able to make the break and take themselves and their children out to safety. So now we'd like to switch gears and talk and kind of go more into what are the services that shelters like the Center for Hope and Safety provide. So I'd like to introduce now Mira Moreno, who's a licensed professional counselor and the director of programs for the Center for Hope and Safety. And she's going to describe how organizations like hers help victims like Francine.
Thank you, Donna. Good evening, everyone. And I also want to, just thank you, Dr. Michelson, for getting us really started on how deep of an issue this is in our community. And I would like to draw attention to not just all of New Jersey, but just locally too. And in New Jersey, everything comes together. And what we're seeing is that even in the homeless population, what we see is that because of domestic violence, women and children are being pushed out of their homes. They have to leave their homes. And we see that in some of our numbers that I want to just present briefly. And what we see is that 15% of the families that are without homes and they're homeless, it's because of domestic violence. And many of those families, most of the families have a child under the age of 18. Next slide. What we saw with the pandemic and domestic violence compounding together really, just put most of the victims who are women really behind. And we saw that in our numbers where we had unprecedented numbers. Our hotline, where our 24/7 free hotline where anybody can call, we saw an increase of about 50%. And again, that just demonstrates how much the pandemic exacerbated the already existing crisis of domestic violence. And then it didn't end in 2020. In last year, we saw an additional jump of about 23%. Again, just showing that even as the lockdowns were ending and things were opening back up, the violence being perpetrated was not lessening by any means. Slide. Most of the clients that come to Center for Hope and Safety have little to no income. They have almost no assets. In terms of demographics, they really represent all of us. They represent our community. We see anywhere in addition to the kids, we see the ages anywhere from 18 to even over 60. Majority of them are moms, and they have younger children under the age of 4. And racially too, we see our local community, which is essentially, Caucasian, African American, Latinx, Asian, Native American, and so on and so forth. Right. So Center for Hope and Safety, or CHS, as we say, what we do when you call our hotline for those who are seeking immediate safety is we help to figure out what your threat level is, where the risks are, where are some strengths in terms of, leaving the household, leaving the relationship, and what we help for you or somebody that who is being victimized is to try to create a safety plan. And our hotline number right here is listed, and please take note, we have more information coming up, but this is a really important number. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the services that we provide. When we talk about, clients, those who have been victimized calling us, we see everyone. We see women, men, children, as well as other adult or younger dependents that are in the home that also get victimized. Our services are available free of charge. We have the 24-hour crisis hotline, and we provide what we call crisis shelter to everyone. However, we also have other programs, and I'm really going to go into detail about them. But all of these programs exist for anyone to access. You do not have to leave your home, or if you're living with a family member or somebody that is staying with you perhaps who needs support, they can access all of our services. So let me tell you a little bit more about those services. We have a program called the Community Services that provides safety planning, case management, counseling support, not just for you, but also linkages for your children and other dependents. If you need any sort of referral for food, groceries, gas cards, anything that you need, they're able to provide. Then we have a team called Economic Empowerment Team that provides all sorts of supports that exist for career and job and vocational training. So whether it's for school, whether it's your current job that you need support with to find a job, to work on a resume, to practice for an interview, anything like that, to start to even look for something or to even just speak to somebody about it. We have a professional career counselor who can really walk you through that. In there, we also provide housing support. That means, connections with realtors, landlords, working on financial budgeting, literacy, different banking systems, retirement, anything under the sun, we're able to provide information on. We have a very wonderful program for children up to the age of 12, where we provide creative arts therapy, individual counseling, as well as group counseling for children who have been directly abused by abusers, and also those who grow up in a home where their parent has been abused, because that causes them a lot of trauma as well. And that's a Project Child program. In that program, we also provide counseling support and case management support to the parents. We also provide several other support groups for women, for men, and the topics, of course, are the domestic violence and the trauma, but also we provide other groups such as financial literacy workshops, self-care workshops, yoga classes, so on. We also have a long-term housing program, which is up to 2 years, called the Transitional Housing Program, where for those who need supportive housing, they can stay in our program for up to 2 years as they rebuild their lives. A lot of times, what we see is there are child welfare cases, or through DIFAS, as used to be called, or DCP&P, where especially if a family has a child and something is revealed, the school will call in the case. And we have a program called the DCP&P Liaison Program that sits in DIFAS DCP&P's office and provides advocacy and representation and support to clients who are dealing with that child welfare system. And then last but not least, we have a wonderful in-home legal services program that Kate will actually share more information about. So just to sum it all up, anything that anybody needs who has gone through domestic violence, who's in a situation, who's not yet ready to leave the relationship perhaps, but needs support, needs to talk to somebody, call our crisis line. It does not mean you have to leave. We have all these services that you can access from wherever you are. Thank you. Slide. So, how can you help who perhaps needs our services, or, and if you yourself need some support? Number one, I will say is, familiarize yourself with Center for Hope and Safety. I hope that today's presentation will be helpful. You can give that information to somebody who needs our support. We focus on Bergen County primarily. However, there is a domestic violence agency hotline, and the number is listed on the slide, where they can connect you to the local organization that can provide that support. If someone is talking to you about what they're going through, I it's something that we've reiterated. Sometimes it's not as simple or easy, oh, to just leave. So just meeting them where they're at in their process, in their journey, is really helpful, to have that alliance for them and to be able to safely rebuild their lives. Because what we know is safety is number one. And those who have been victimized, the victims, they really have the best knowledge on their safety. They've been surviving this for a while, and they know what needs to happen for them to exit safely. And at the end, I really will just reiterate, domestic violence, the only person responsible for causing it is really the abuser and the perpetrator. And no matter what anyone does, they never deserve the violence. Slide. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mira. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You're going to introduce, I think,
yep.
Right.
As I was sharing, we have a wonderful in-house legal services program, and we have Catherine Kate Miller, who is our senior staff attorney, and she will talk to us more about the legal issues around domestic violence.
Thank you, Mira. So I want to talk first about just what the CHS Legal Department does, or Center for Hope and Safety Legal Department. So we offer free representation in a variety of matters. We temporary and final restraining orders. So when a client is fleeing an abuser, one of the legal remedies available to her is a restraining order. And again, I'm just using her because as the doctor had stated before, most victims are women, even though of course, you know, some of them are definitely men. So if you go to the police, you can actually obtain a temporary restraining order that day, which can give you possession of the home, order that the abuser leave the home, that the abuser not contact you, give you temporary custody, temporary support, and other matters. And about 10 days later, or 10 to 30 days later, there is a hearing to see whether or not that temporary restraining order should be made final. So we offer representation in both that temporary as well as that final restraining order hearing. We also offer representation in custody because for whatever reason, many clients decide either not to go through the restraining order route or they still have custody issues even after that. In child support, it's critical to having to breaking the cycle and having a pattern of self-sufficiency. You need some financial support for that, parenting time issues, divorce, and immigration. And if we can't represent a client for whatever matter, we also still provide them advice and counsel on those matters. Next slide, please. So how we help. So if we are representing someone, we would prepare them for hearing. So we meet with the client either in person or via Zoom, depending on what they're comfortable with. We conduct a mock direct and cross for them. We prepare witnesses. We make sure that the client feels as comfortable and as prepared as possible for that hearing because it's scary to be in court. We help them gather evidence. We can subpoena the police reports, photographs. A lot of domestic violence nowadays, there's evidence of it via text messages and emails. So we can gather and prepare those communications, make sure that they're time-stamped appropriately and in a way that can be properly submitted to the court. We hold evidence if necessary. Sometimes clients might decide to go back to a defendant, but they might, say, can you just hold on to this evidence for us? And we will, of course, happily do that. We prepare for expert evaluations, particularly in custody and divorce cases. Sometimes the court will appoint an expert on child custody, and we can prepare our clients for those. We help with pleadings. We draft complaints, answers, as well as motions. And then finally, we actually go to court and represent clients in court free of charge. We also try to advocate within the system in other ways. So in the criminal justice system, we're very fortunate that we have wonderful relationships with the prosecutor and with law enforcement. So if a client has a criminal case, the criminal case might be entirely separate from her family law case. Now, in that case, she's a witness, but we can still accompany her to court, explain to her what's going on, and just support her and make sure that she's not feeling alone in this. A lot of times, if there's a criminal case, there might be interviews with prosecutors or law enforcement, and we can help accompany her to those, again, you know, just so that she feels that there's someone who's on her side. If needed, we can refer to defense counsel. So unfortunately, sometimes abusers will press charges against clients. One thing we see all too often is our client might be strangled around the neck by the abuser, but she might have scratched him in self-defense. So you'll see that she might actually have criminal charges against her for those scratches. So we have defense counsels that we can refer to. And we also try to do policy advocacy. I'm a member of the New Jersey Coalition, as well as some other groups that help advocate for in Trenton to try to make sure that the voices of domestic violence are heard in that. Next slide, please. A big thing that abusers use against clients is immigration statuses. So this is a very brief thing about immigration, but so if a lot of times we'll see where the abuser will specifically deny or withhold a client from obtaining legal status just so that she feels like she cannot call the police. So even though he might be an American citizen or a resident, and she might be eligible for status, he might let her fiance visa or something expire specifically to keep her under his control. She does have relief from that under VAWA, or and which would allow for her to self-petition if she's a survivor of domestic violence. Another relief is a U visa, which allows for a victim of a crime to apply for a visa if they're cooperating for law enforcement. And another type of relief for domestic violence victims are T visas. And that allows for if the victim is of human trafficking to apply for visa. And we work with, we have an immigration attorney, and we can also represent those clients in those in their immigration matters as well. Next slide, please. And again, just how to obtain services, please call our CHS hotline if you're a Bergen County resident, or even if you're not, we would try to connect you with the appropriate services. If not, there's also a New Jersey hotline here and a national hotline in case you are not a New Jersey resident.
Thank you, Kate and Mira. You know, until we started working with you on this, I don't think I fully appreciated, you know, just how many services an organization like the Center for Hope and Safety offer. And because the problems are complex that these victims have, and the full service that you have to provide in order to kind of help them get back on their feet. And of course, Kate, the immigration layover on this in terms of the legal issues is one that I don't think a lot of people realize at all. So thank you for sharing that with us. So we have to end with our experts talk with a success story. And this is also taken from the clientele of the Center for Hope and Safety. And this is a woman who had availed herself of the services that were described tonight. And this is Melanie's story.
Through the course of life, I ended up in an abusive relationship that was not only abusive to me, but my 3 children as well. My ex-husband, he almost broke my nose. He broke my hand. Like it was bad. It was so bad. I mean, I didn't know how to breathe. Eventually, when you've had enough, you've had enough. And I found the courage to leave. And when I got there, I didn't know what to do. So a friend of mine suggested services at the Center for Hope and Safety because they had helped them through a friend they knew. Somebody went there and they helped them. Again, they helped us so much. They gave us school supplies. Leanne, they gave me clothes for my very first interview, and we sat there and she practiced my interview with me. And a very large portion of everything that we have today is because of Center for Hope and Safety and the wonderful things that they do there. And because of their support, I was able to establish my job as a behavioral therapist, and I was able to make enough money to buy my own house all by myself. And yesterday I purchased a brand new 2022 Honda Pilot because of where I am today. And it's all because they helped me, give me the confidence and support to get into a healthy state. And we are now a very happy family moving forward in our lives.
That's such a heartwarming video. I always kind of brings a tear to my eye. I'm sure it does for our 3 expert panels and for everyone in the audience too when I see that video. Okay, I think it's time for questions. The experts have given us kind of a background, so we'll open it up. Rosemary, did we get any questions in?
Well, we have one, and maybe people now can take a minute and put their questions in the Q&A. But one of the earliest questions was, how can someone get the help when they need to get out without letting on that they are leaving? How quickly can that happen? And how do they stay safe in the interim? Mira, that sounds like right up your alley.
Yeah, that's a great question. It has a broad answer. So I'll try to touch upon some things to be mindful of. Your safety, a woman's safety when she is deciding to leave is at the highest risk. So this question really, is really important. I shared our phone number. We actually also have a hotline email. So I asked that the person who is in this situation, I think there's so many things that can go wrong. I don't know how the abuser monitors or controls information, leaving and coming in with it. So you want to look at phone tracking when you're going to places, is he or her watching? Are they with you at all times? And there's so many of those things that I think what we have learned is our survivors, they really know the nuances. They really know the small gaps that you have to make any sort of connection with an organization such as ours. And when you make that conversation, we can have a more customized sort of what we call the safety plan, which answers the question as to how can you stay safe while you're taking legal action, and how quickly can that happen? The pace at which this process moves in terms of leaving really is based on the comfort and the safety level of the survivor. If you need to leave at 2 in the morning, and we have done this so many times, that is the time you leave. Depending on your comfort with the police, they are a great resource. So the police will bring you to the police station, where if you need to call our hotline or any other hotline, they will allow you to do that. If that is the best course, or that matches your comfort with the situation. And so it really, so it's like I was saying, it's a broad answer. And I'll defer to Kate for the last part of the question, which is, how can they file legal action? If you want to talk about that, Kate, a little bit more.
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit in my presentation, but yes, so you can file legal action. You can either do it at the Bergen County courts between 8:30 and 4:30, or you can also contact your local police department and file it all throughout the night if something were to happen there. So you could obtain I mentioned the temporary restraining order. You could obtain the temporary restraining order that day and have your user removed from the home or wherever. I think you're on mute, Ruth.
I think this was the first time. A follow-up to that is, do you ever recommend that people leave? In other words, do you ever actually give that recommendation? And at what point would you do that?
No, we never really give that recommendation. Statistically, a survivor will attempt to leave about 7 times before finally leaving. And wherever you are in that journey, we're right here for you.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to hold the volunteer ones to the end. What is the average length of time a victim stays before leaving? Is that able to be, you just said sometimes they leave as many as 7 times.
Yeah, I will. There really is no, we have not seen an average in particular, and I'll defer to Dr. Michelson too, a bit on the statistical side. But we have had survivors who were in an abusive relationship for decades, to one-on-one end, and on the other end, we have had clients who were not even in a fully serious relationship with, but it quickly turned very dangerous, to the point that they really needed support and services, or they needed to leave their current home because they were being stalked, or their safety had been compromised, or their cars were being their car was being tracked, and so yeah, we've seen the whole range.
I think the other question, the other way that question could be read is, what's the average length of time that a victim stays at the center before leaving?
Oh, okay.
I may have misunderstood. I mean, the question was
maybe yes. So what, about a couple of months for our shelter, which is, an emergency shelter. But again, in the shelter, our goal is to help to put all the basic necessities in place. So what is that? We have the housing. We want to make sure if there are kids involved, they're reconnected to their school, everything is in place. Everybody has food, clothes. We have had clients who have called us, especially during the pandemic. We had one woman who called us. She said that I ran out of the home. All I have is my child and my phone that I'm using to call you. And we said, don't worry, where are you? We'll send you an Uber. Come on in. So all the basic necessities we provide. The housing plan is a big thing that we work on, because we know that that's what our survivors have shared with us, and that's one of the main things. They want to move on and figure out where they can live safely. So on average, it's a couple of months. It used to be about a month and a half before the pandemic. It's gone up to 3 to 4 months. But yeah.
Another question is, if a woman, what is your advice for us to share with women who say they are staying for the sake of the children, but they should leave?
Yeah, it's very common. And, I think parents really, it comes from a place of the stability and the things that they can offer to their children by staying in that relationship, by sacrificing what they need to sacrifice. What we do know is that, a lot of times parents believe that their children don't see the abuse, that they don't hear it, they don't feel it, they don't catch glimpses of it. When they ask questions and parents give them an answer that is not satisfactory, that they're okay with it. We know from years and years of data, and Dr. Michelson, please jump in, that is not true. And unfortunately, the violence, the likelihood that a child who grew up in a violent home and for them to also perpetrate violence as they get older is really high. So really information, because this question and somebody's decision to do that comes from a really loving and noble place. But this information, I think, is really important for parents to have.
Donna, how much time, because I have 2 questions that deal with voluntarism and then one more question that deals with children. So
I think Venice was going to just add on to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Venice.
No, don't be sorry at all. I just wanted to add really quickly that, somebody leaving doesn't mean that the abusive parent will never be back in their life, right? Because it's still, it's often still a father, but something has to be interrupted so that children are not witnessing violence. so that anybody isn't experiencing violence. And frankly, so that the abuser can get something in their life so that they can stop this behavior and stop this. And frankly, so that the children can get, what Mira was saying, right? That this can be interrupted so that the children don't become abusers themselves. They don't learn the behavior that they've been witnessing and they see as normal. But it doesn't mean that this person is never going to be a part of their lives ever again. If they can interrupt the violence and then they can, bring a parent back into a life in a healthy way and learn from that, then everybody ends up being better off and we can interrupt this. But no child, no anyone should be witnessing or experiencing abuse. That must be interrupted first.
Does the abuser have access to the children? And maybe this is a Kate question, I don't know.
Yes, so it depends on the court order. So oftentimes when the client will get the first order, the court will suspend all parenting time. What they're supposed to do is if the restraining order is made final, they're supposed to suspend the parenting time or make it supervised until what's called a risk assessment is done, where they can see what the safest visitation is for the children. Sometimes by consent by the parties or another things, the abuser may have unsupervised parenting time with the children, but it really just depends on the court order.
Is there a possibility that the abuser would pursue the victim to your shelter or a new location? And do you settle them at an unknown location? Have you had that action or that problem?
Yes. So all our shelters are confidential. So they're not advertised, they're never listed. And yes, they're few and far between. The breaches can happen. But to prevent that, we take our safety protocols very seriously, the phone tracking, making sure we never even have our clients come directly to the shelter. We have another spot from where either we go meet them or we send an Uber. Or if they're driving their own car, they get there, we walk them through on what to look at and make sure that nobody's following them or nobody's there for them to then get to the shelter. However, if there is that off chance, and it has happened where a perpetrator found a client, but again, the fact that, the confidentiality is a big thing, and to be in a setting with other people does provide a small layer of safety at the very least. And we relocate them if the confidentiality is breached.
Kate, how many women drop their restraining orders?
I mean, it's hard to say because, by the time that they contact us, generally they are a little bit more motivated, but I would say most of the clients that I encounter have dismissed a restraining order once or more in the past. And I've worked with clients who, they're like, I want to just get back with him, for the sake of the children or something. And the most important thing that we can do is try to give a safe space so that they know that they can always come back to us. So we try to be very non-judgmental and very supportive. So yes, many women do drop their restraining orders, but then they always feel like they can come back to us if necessary.
Okay. Venice, this may be a question for you, but for everybody. Is there therapeutic help that is offered or provided to the abuser to stop the violence cycle?
So I could just speak briefly about that. I think, whether or not the Center for Hope and Safety does that is different. There are interventions that exist that are evidence-based that can interrupt this cycle, but they are not prioritized right now. We prioritize punishment over rehabilitation, and also recognize, as well, that the best way to prevent this is to start when people are small, to interrupt, ways in which we teach, in particular, our boys to act, and how they can behave, and how they should behave, and also how we tend to blame our girls when they are even very small for their own victimization. So first of all, there are therapeutic programs that are evaluated and that do exist, but they are not well funded, they are not well available. But then also, we have to interrupt this at the very, very beginning. You know, again, remember, anyone that is abusing someone else is almost definitely someone who was abused as a child themselves or witnessed abuse as a child themselves. So if we are worried about the children, recognize that these are just the children grown up. And so if we're going to interrupt this, we have to make really radical changes in how we raise our children and what we raise them to believe is acceptable behavior.
Okay, well then I think that is sort of that ends most of the substantive questions that I can see. And the two questions that remain are whether or not, if women have time, or people on the phone have time, on the Zoom have time, is training provided for people to volunteer either on Zoom or in person at the Center for Hope and Safety? Mira?
I'm sorry, what, can you repeat the question? I think you
Sure.
got cut off.
It has to do with what may be available for women or people on the Zoom call who have the time. Is there the possibility to volunteer either on Zoom or in person at the center for people on the call?
Yes, we have a huge food operation that we carry out to make sure all our clients, right now we are at capacity for our clients, so our staff would appreciate support to get food to our clients, to pack boxes for our clients. On our website, and I will put that in our in the chat, you can connect with Liz, who is our Director of Development, and she will help you get connected with the volunteering opportunities that we have. And okay. Other than that, we do one-time big events as well. We do a domestic violence walk. We do a vigil in October in Vanson Park. Those are really great events. We're doing an art exhibit this year as well across the libraries. We are doing another art exhibit at the Hackensack Medical Center with the medical students. So there's a lot going on. Please sign up for our newsletter through our website so you can be up to date as to what's going on and join us. Yeah.
There was a question also, Mira, about do you do outreach to emergency rooms in private?
Yes, actually, I am doing a training in a little while with the ER department, because that is where sometimes the physical abuse, especially when it's, you know, they need medical attention and they get there and they get the help. It's like that small window that we have. So we do outreach to them. I see, yeah, the small cards, exactly. We used to do that. We've done so many things like the pens, the lipstick, the mirror. But I find that, you know, all of those things work for people that works. And if not, we have the digital information available. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think, unfortunately, the other questions that we had were about how people can help more. So that's a great segue into, I think we've got to, our time is almost up, is to now, you know, hit the, ask for the order and say, how can you, everyone on the audience can help. And first, I just want to thank our three panelists again for sharing your expertise and inspiring us with the work that you do. And I know that our audience wants to know how they can help. First, as has been mentioned a couple of times, please share this information for anybody that you know that might be a victim of domestic violence or that you suspected. If they're in Bergen County, they can call New Jersey, they can call the Center for Hope and Safety directly at that number. Or if you're outside of Bergen County, that number, 800 number there is what you can use to find out your local domestic service, domestic violence agency or shelter. Second, the other thing, main thing that we should talk about is that our group is raising money for the Center for Hope and Safety tonight as part of our partnership with them. So you can make a donation to help the work that was described tonight by either texting or using the link that's there to make a donation. And we really encourage you to make a donation. And I think you've seen that the work that they do is so vital, but it's usually done on a shoestring, so they absolutely need help. I'll just ask anyone from TTN. I think we set a goal tonight of $8,000. Does anyone know what we're up to?
The last time I looked, I think we were at about 4,800, but that was a day or so ago.
Okay, maybe I can find out now. Oh, we're up to 5,400, Rosemary.
Great.
So more donations have come in, which is great. And finally, of course, we want to invite anybody who's not a member of TTN, if you'd like to join us. We work on programs like this, or just have a lot of fun with a bunch of great, smart women. And there's our website that's listed there. So I'd like to thank all the panelists again, and the TTN support team for this. But I'd also like to make a real big shout out to, in particular, to Kathy Sherwood, our TTN chairwoman of Women of Impact, our Women of Impact group, who really led the pulling together of this program. So thank you, everyone. I hope that you learned something. I know that I did tonight, and that you're inspired to help contribute to the important work being done and being described. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.